Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric. I got another fun and random episode for you guys this Friday afternoon because a lot of you have been sending me questions on Discord and on Twitter about the recent MARS FPGA announcements, and because I don't have a MARS to show you on camera, they don't exist yet technically as a consumer product, have a little bit of the MiSTer FPGA here in Mario's shining face because we talked about porting MiSTer cores to MARS in the previous video. But recently, MARS showed off some prototype boards down at Free Play Florida, and you'll see here at the bottom right hand corner, all of the video was analog out over that VGA port. I'm assuming it's RGB, but I never got a chance to see anything around the television and photos people's posted, so we'll just assume that it was an RGBS signal. But a lot of what MARS has talked about is the HDMI output as well, because I would say the majority of people watching probably don't use a PVM or other CRT TV. Leave me a comment down below if you do. But they're talking about 4K at 60 Hz over HDMI, and they have noted it's going to be a 444 color space. Well, recently they announced that the maker of RetroTINK is going to be working on the project with them as well, and obviously Mike, as a developer of retro scaling hardware, is no slouch whatsoever. His products are absolutely incredible, and I'm sure I'll be getting a 4K as soon as they go on sale. But what they're talking about is them bringing over some of the features to MARS, such as auto scaling, shadow mask, and scan line filters. Those are a lot of the features of the RetroTINK that people really enjoy, and shadow masks and scanline filters are available on MiSTer FPGA as well. It's more of a software function than it is any sort of hardware implementation. But if we take a look around the RetroTINK 4K, it's got a lot of inputs, and I can't wait to start plugging things into them when I pick one up. But you will see here that the RetroTINK 4K is working off a very similar chip to what you're going to see in MiSTer FPGA exactly. This is an Altera Cyclone V, but it's not the SoC with the ARM core. Now, this is an FPGA only chip, where the chip on MiSTer also has some CPU cores that are not based in FPGA technology. But if we take a look over at MiSTer FPGA, something I've shown off on the channel once or twice if you catch my meaning, there is going to be a very similar Altera chip on that board. It's going to be in the same nuclear family, the Cyclone V, but it does have that ARM core SoC designation on it, and that means it does have those ARM processor cores built into the chip as well. Now, if we take a look back over at the MARS specs, what we talk about with the logic elements is the total amount of logic that the FPGA chip has involved. In MARS instance, it's 176,000 of them, and Titanium does make a lot of different chips, and MARS team has chosen that TI-180 at 176K logic. But when we talk about RetroTINK integration into MARS, whatever that may be, we do not know yet. It has not really been announced. It does mean that that's going to take up some logic, presumably. Inside of the RetroTINK 4K, you have that Cyclone V, and it has 149,000 logic elements. We'll just round it up to 150 for my ease of use. This is more logic elements than the entirety of the MiSTer FPGA project uses. We're doing 110K on the MiSTer side of things. But if RetroTINK does utilize some of the MARS FPGA logic gates, that would mean that the total amount of logic available to MARS would come down to accommodate for whatever Mike and the RetroTINK team put into MARS. Just be aware that that's how some of these things work, unless they're pivoting his work over to some sort of ARM core that's not within that FPGA they're using. So games like this here wouldn't really be affected too much, but when we talk about the total logic elements, just be aware that if there is TINK integration within the FPGA footprint, that would reduce down the overall ceiling of what logic is available for cores themselves. I don't know how many logic elements it would take to get some of this TINK integration in. Maybe it brings it down from 176K to 150K. Maybe it brings it down only 1K, we don't know, and we have to wait and see. Now, moving over to an article from RetroDodo, hands-on with MARS FPGA, I'll leave a link to this below. They do talk about that integration with RetroTINK in the MARS project, but they also talk about a topic that I've been getting a lot of questions about in comments on Discord and on Twitter, and that is based upon the open source nature of the MARS FPGA project, because on Twitter, the MARS team stated that the cores are going to be open source, and we have a quote from them here, and it basically says, "We've sourced tens of thousands of dollars of arcade hardware from MARS. Cores will be exclusive for a period of time, then open source." What this is stating from the team is that at least on day one when cores go live, they are not going to be open source code, they are going to be closed source code, and at what a period of time means we do not know. It could be a day, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be a century. Those are all periods of time, so we have to wait and see what they're going to be doing with that, but it does back up a little bit from the open source nature versus MiSTer that you saw there. And they are still talking about porting every single MiSTer core to Mars Day 0, so that would be the expectation now. Anything that currently runs on MiSTer FPGA will be available day 1 on Mars based upon what the team has stated, but it seems like the Mars cores will not be available to be ported day 1 to any other project, only when the code is open source would that be a possibility. So they're going to be porting these open source cores to Mars, and it's apparently going to happen the day that it releases. And I did a video last week, I'll leave a link below, talking about the entire overall porting process between an Altera Cyclone FPGA to the Titanium chips, which are not one-to-one hardware matches, and it does take a little bit of work to get those done. But at least from day 1, the Mars cores are not going to be open sourced, they're going to be closed source, and we'll have to wait and see how long it takes them to open the sourcing up, or if they do. Now moving on to another tease, and I got a lot of questions about this, they were showing Mortal Kombat 2 and they said that it was going to be a launch game for the MARS FPGA project. There is another expectation set that when the MARS project ships, you'll be able to play Mortal Kombat 2 the minute you take it out of the box. Well, to be fair, I'm sure there'll be some sort of update process, so you really have to just kind of run update, but then you would be playing Mortal Kombat 2 day 1. So that is another thing that the MARS team has stated that will be available day 0. So now we know that at least Mortal Kombat 2 and every single MiSTer core that exists on MiSTer should be playable by the time the product's ready to ship based upon the team's statements. Although they are not showing any footage running on MARS FPGA, they did say right on Twitter that they used some YouTube footage they found of an arcade PCB running, and I got a lot of questions asking whether or not this was real MARS footage. I didn't know, but now we do have clarification. If we take a look over at the System 16 website for the Midway T-Unit hardware, you're going to get an overall breakdown of the specifications of that hardware. This was a popular board for Midway back in the day, and it really isn't the most impressive spec in the world as far as arcade hardware is concerned. Definitely something that should run fine on Mars, but really the hidden gem is going to be Judge Dredd. Don't give me a Mortal Kombat 2 core day 1. I don't really care about that as much as I care about Baby Goro being walked on a leash. All jokes aside, the Judge Dredd prototype is a really fun vibe, and if you've never checked it out, you definitely should, and maybe the Mars team will get it running at some point in time in the future. But there are a decent amount of games on this board, and pretty much just like MiSTer, once one game runs on a board, it's pretty much an easy win to get the rest of them. And I'm sure Mortal Kombat 2 is being considered for Pramod here, because he's been talking about his work on this core for MiSTer FPGA and some RAM issues he says he's been running into. You can take a look at his Twitter and read this entire thread, but obviously this seems like something the Mars team would want to do day 1, because he's also working with the Mars team in bringing cores there as well. He's part of the team, so it makes sense that they would say Mortal Kombat 2 playable from day 1, but they've teased so many different games, but they haven't really said any dates on many of them whatsoever. I did a video on all the different things the Mars team has showed, but this is one of the first things they've set a date to being available on launch, along with all of the MiSTer cores that ever did exist. You'll see here that Pramod's still struggling a little bit on the MiSTer side, so we'll have to wait and see, but I'm guessing it probably will be possible on MiSTer. But again, if you've never played Judge Dredd, check it out, and it would be fun to have games like this available in FPGA. While Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 2 boards are not rare whatsoever, they still hold their value because they are very popular games. I've never been the biggest fan of Mortal Kombat, but I know a lot of you are out there, and I'm sure a lot of people are excited about the potential to play Mortal Kombat 2 day 1 on an FPGA device. But for my money, the best game on this hardware has got to be Judge Dredd. It's a little zag for the video, but definitely play this if you never have. It's the weirdest prototype ever. I can 100% understand why it did get canceled, but it is still a bummer. But that's another thing that people just kept asking me about, is Mortal Kombat 2 on MiSTer, and now you know, based upon what the team statements have been, once you order your Mars FPGA sometime in the future, when you take it out of the box, Mortal Kombat 2 should be there. But that's basically all that has been stated so far in the Mars project. And of course, if you have any questions, leave them down below, and I will try to find the information and give you guys an answer. Obviously, Mars doesn't exist yet, so I really can't do much more for it, but we do know some more details. Mike from the RetroTINK team is going to be working on some of the video implementation for Mars. Cores are not going to be open sourced, at least from day 1, and there's no time frame stated as to when they will go open source. And I know you guys have been asking about whether or not the cores will be open source, because the Mars team stated they would be, so now we have clarification, and Mortal Kombat 2 should be a launch game for Mars. If you have any other questions, leave them down below and I'll try to answer each and every one of them, but it is Friday afternoon, so go have a drink and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.